Episode 14 is sponsored by Profound Movement. Do you and your coworkers need to hit the communication reset button? It's time to stop allowing personality differences to get in the way of cultivating a happy, productive work environment. Profound Movement offers a practical approach to corporate wellness programming by facilitating on-site workshops for your teams to build a harmonious, collaborative, and productive environment. Profound Movement focuses on the physical aspects of stress reduction as well as team building for a healthier, happier workplace. Visit profoundmovement.com to request a free consultation today to unite your teams, allowing them to perform with a confident, focused mindset. Hello everyone, this is Daniela, the founder and the host for the Still Standing podcast, which is a part of the Still Standing Together series that includes this podcast, support groups and workshops for women, an online community of positivity, and apparel. And if you listened to episode 1, you heard that I started this a few months ago, and the podcast was designed to be a way for us to follow up with our attendees from our support groups and workshops. And this was also a way to reach out to more people to help them while they're going through any struggles or challenges in their lives. You know, it's hard for us to see the light during the struggle, and what really had helped me was talking to people, talking to therapists, talking to a mental health professional, whether it was traditional or non-traditional, meeting up with other women in my position who are maybe entrepreneurs, who are artists. For others, maybe it's mothers, maybe it's people who are transitioning in some way or another. Maybe they're moving or relocating to another city to live in. Maybe they just need a change, or, maybe it's the uncontrollable. Something has happened that we just can't prepare for. I wanted to create this community to support everybody so that they had resources and tools and go-tos and honest talk, honest conversation, honest support, and openness to make them feel as though they're not alone. It's important that whatever I do through these podcasts or through any of these resources through Still Standing, that there's a sense of togetherness and there's a sense of reliability, but there's also a sense of self-discovery. Welcome back, everybody. This is your host, Daniela Galdi, the founder of Still Standing Together. Thank you so much for joining us, especially on today's topic, financial anxiety. Dun, dun, dun. My goodness, has this been something that has caused me so much grief and worry and anxiety and stress over the past, I can't even tell you how many years. So it's really nice that our guest, Cara Rossi, is going to fill us in on some really educational information to know about either starting a business, borrowing money from a bank, how to budget, what's important to know when you are considering things like a savings or just individual finances to help us get past these awful, awful feelings of anxiety that I know for myself happen very often. And as we spoke about in our support group and workshop that focused on solutions, a lot of us were feeling the same way. I actually got a lot of feedback before the event saying, I hope you have this again because this is something that is always troubling me. So we will definitely have this coming back in 2020. But if you ever need anything or any extra advice or insight, please definitely email us, reach out through stillstandingtogether.com, reach out through Instagram at stillstandingtogether, and also visit the page on stillstandingtogether.com that is designated to our support leaders, and you can reach out to any of them for help with whatever you're going through, Cara's information is also on there, and I will be listing it in the information section for this podcast episode. So let me tell you a little bit about Cara. Cara is the Assistant Vice President of Business Banking at Citizens Bank. Cara is a financial and commercial banking specialist with over 20 years of banking and credit experience, who has extensive knowledge of lending and SBA programs for various industries. Now, not only was Cara able to help those of us who were at the group who are new entrepreneurs or maybe existing business owners, but she also spoke with us on an individual level on our personal finances. And you'll find a lot of that talk and discussion in this episode. What you'll also find is that not only does she tell us the logistics and fill us in on certain banking terminology to help us feel more comfortable, because communicating about money can be very uncomfortable in many situations, but she'll also share how tapping into her positive energy and making sure that she worked to believe in herself, and how her spiritual beliefs and things she's learned about manifesting have all come into play for her personal financial situation. Two very important points that I want to make is that we do all have to take action and confront our financial situations to help relieve that anxiety we're feeling, but also that you are not alone in the anxiety. What I've learned through all of my experiences working to improve my mental health and my mindset is that my circumstances financially, whatever they may be, sometimes might not change, or sometimes I'm thrown things that are out of my control. But the fact that I am able to manage what is happening in my mind has really helped me to stay optimistic about what the future does hold. So if you're feeling overwhelmed about school loans, or how are you going to pay this bill, or you just don't know where to go from here, you've done everything you can, you're overworked, please listen to this, hear her advice, and hear about how that mindset and the work that you do with yourself can make the situation better for you overall. Hi, Cara. Thank you so much for doing this podcast episode. Last time we talked was at the Solutions for Coping with Financial Anxiety, which was a very, very popular topic.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining again.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So I want to just dive right in and have you tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why this relates and resonates with you.
Sure. So I'm Assistant Vice President for Citizens Bank. My specialties in business banking currently, but I've been in banking for over 20 years, and I have a long line of credit experience, banking, educating, various realms of the financial industry, SBA programs, and so on.
And how did you get into this?
So I actually started out at 18 years old as a bank teller, and I had some really good leaders who, pushed me to learn more about banking and finances. And coming from a background of, my family were immigrants that came here from other countries, predominantly Italy, and there's some other Greek and other nationalities in there as well. I watched my family and they were business owners, and I watched them kind of struggle financially and not have that financial information readily available. It was kind of like a mystery, if you will, and there wasn't anyone that was willing to kind of educate people on how to manage credit, how to borrow, just things that I think would have made my parents and grandparents' lives easier if they had that information.
And was there anything else too that helped you in your personal growth with taking on this role? Because I love the story that you have. Maybe you can share that a little bit about how it all really came about.
Yeah, so my parents were, a one-income household. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked in warehousing in Philadelphia. So we grew up very poor. I had 3 siblings, and, you kind of learn about what's really important when you don't grow up with all the fancier things and lots of money. But more importantly, I just wanted to always be able to help my parents. And as I got older and learned more things, I was able to go back and educate them later in life on retirement and how to live more comfortable. And just, I wish they had had that information while I was growing up, because I think my upbringing would have been less stressful financially for my parents.
Right, absolutely.
So, and my grandfather was a business owner as well. Both my grandmothers worked for business owners, and I watched them struggle, through their lives financially. So that prompted me to want to do better for myself and for my own children, and just, at least be able to go back later in life and help my family.
And you do help. You helped us all at the group event, which was really great because you gave it a perspective. You shared personal stories, but then you also shared your expertise in banking and finances and resources and things like that. But then you also have this very caring and holistic approach of, the belief in ourselves and that things will work out and things like that.
Well, I think a lot of people's financial anxiety comes from fear. And fear is a huge block in life. I mean, that will stop you from making things better. And I think that fear comes into play in a lot of aspects. It came into play in my own life in my very, very early career. I was afraid to make changes, afraid to inquire. But because I was in the industry and I had really, really good leaders in my life who were open and honest with me with information and education, and kind of pointed me in the right direction, even helping me uncover my own strengths as far as, finances. And then I was able to even draw on things that my own family taught me, like my dad's mom, who was a single parent. My dad's father died when he was 11 in a massive heart attack. Back then, medicine wasn't as good as it is today, and he unfortunately died of a heart problem that's probably very treatable now. But my grandmother was alone raising 4 boys. In a time where, women didn't have careers or be the breadwinner. So she had to really, truly be good with money to survive in that kind of an environment. She never remarried. She focused on just raising her children. And when I got my first apartment, she made me this bill book. And what it was just a bunch of envelopes stapled together with titles and dollar amounts. And I have to tell you, that taught me how to budget. I got my own apartment when I was 17 years old, and I've never had any trouble paying bills or any financial trouble, even when I didn't make a lot of money. So I was I was a young single mother. I had my oldest daughter when I was 16. Her father wasn't exactly participative in her life, to say the least. Well, that's a story for another day, though. So I had to, figure it out. So I drew on that experience, and then I was in banking at the time, so that helped me kind of push forward and create a good life for my children and my grandchildren, hopefully. So.
Wow, this brings me to so many questions, Cara. So we'll try to touch on them all. But going back to what you mentioned about your grandmother teaching you how to budget, what was it about? Was it something about her story of being this independent woman now, or was it just, she wanted you to learn this, so you did it for her? What made you continue to have that?
Well, I always looked up to her. She and I had a very good relationship. Unfortunately, I lost her in 2018, but she's still with me in spirit. So it was just that I wanted to be like her. She always had nice things, and my father and my uncles were taken care of very well in life. And she did that all on an income when women didn't get paid very well. So I kind of admired that. And she had a taste for nice things, fine things. And when we would go to her house, she always had, like beautiful furniture, and her house was always decorated. It didn't look like the house of someone who was struggling financially, to say the least. And of course, I was the oldest granddaughter, so she kind of spoiled me rotten a little bit and would buy me like fancy dresses, and, as a little girl. So, that to me said that she was doing well financially. So I trusted her advice, and she never led me wrong. So the bill book, like I said, was just like rent, electric, gas, doctor visit, emergency fund. And, they might have been arbitrary amounts. It might have been like $5 a week for this, $10 a week for that. But even though I didn't have a doctor visit every week, my grandmother taught me that you were saving for those things. So it kind of taught me value of having money for a rainy day. I think that's what she was trying to instill in me. And I may not have learned that from my parents because they really lived paycheck to paycheck, where somehow my grandmother mastered not living paycheck to paycheck. So, I admired that about her, and I really wanted to be in that space. I wanted to be comfortable, especially since I didn't have the luxury of having a second income. Later in life, I did get married to a decent man who obviously helps me financially and worked a team. But, at that point in time, I didn't know that. So,
right. And you were very young.
yeah.
Too,
and I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to rely on my parents who, were struggling in their own right. And I felt that they were very supportive of me. They helped me watch my daughter so I could go to school and work. And, I didn't want to be a burden. That I think was my main mentality of wanting to be stable. And it actually worked out to the point where I was even able to help my parents financially throughout my life. So that made me feel good, like I was giving back to them.
Wow, and that's what I admire you so much for that, because I think, and for myself, when we do see our parents struggle with whatever it is, we do want to be able to go back and help them.
Yeah.
And so I admire you so much that you were able to take that and use what you're doing now to not only better yourself and your life for your children, but also then help your parents who did support you. It's just their financial situation was different.
Yeah. And my dad, to this day, he always says how proud he is of me because I make more than he ever made in his lifetime, and he was proud of that his kids were, and I have siblings who are just as successful, thankfully. And my dad wanted that for his kids because in his day, I think fear stopped him from being the business owner or successful person he could have been. My father is a very talented man. He could have easily owned his own business and probably made millions of dollars with the knowledge that he has, but he feared leaving his job with benefits and health benefits and a steady paycheck to go explore that because he had 4 small children. And I saw growing up how that prevented him from being, I think, more successful. He was very successful. He was a successful dad and husband and supported us our whole lives until we all moved out. And, he kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. So he was successful in that aspect. But my parents didn't have a lot of extra money for fun things like vacations and, nicer, fancier things. Not that that's what's important, but I would have loved to see my parents enjoy a little bit of that. And not have to live so close to the budget.
No, I totally can relate. And I also have 3 siblings too, which is even funnier that we can relate on that too. And my parents were immigrants. And so, but I understand you want to, I think what's so great about you is you're so humble and you're so caring, and that comes out through just you talking about like what you wanted to do for your parents and seeing them be able to enjoy life and things like that. Do you feel though, the security, so you mentioned fear, do you feel like now with what you do, you see that working with the clients you do?
Yeah, so I do run into that quite a bit where I'll give you just a general example. I worked with a manufacturer recently who had some great ideas for a new product line, but the fear of the financial cost of that stopped them from promoting it and actually moving forward to launch the line when it in fact could have increased their business by 10 or 20%. And they were looking for ways to finance that. So that's one of the ways I try to help people today. You have a business owner who has a successful business and it could be better or more, or, maybe they have a great idea, but they're not sure, how am I going to launch this? And they're afraid to hurt their bottom line trying to launch something new versus what they do every day, that it's like their safety net. It's comfort. I know this works, but I have this great possible idea. So that's where I think the fear plays in. And I've seen it with large companies like this manufacturer, or even small companies like a hair salon or a nail salon who has a really talented staff and they could add services, but fear of the cost or how they're going to cover hiring an extra person could prevent them from maybe being even more successful.
Right. So it sounds like when you consult with people, you are doing more than just talking to them about the services of the bank, or
Yes.
you're helping them strategize. So can you give our listeners just a full description of what they could come to you for, or what they could come to a financial advisor for?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also what you do specifically now. You mentioned it a little bit, but if we can go a little bit more in depth, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to say the biggest thing that I run into is people have a lot of fear and hesitation about their credit, personal and business, credit scores, things on the report. One of the ways that I try to help people is I get them very comfortable with credit reports and their credit score. People think if they have a poor score that all is lost, or if they've had a bump or a bankruptcy or a divorce. I mean, this is life. Things happen. No one has a perfect 800 credit score. I've been in banking over 20 years and I've yet to see it. But what I do find is people hit bumps in the road and they're afraid to, correct that because they're not maybe sure how to do it, or they're hesitant if it can be fixed. In their mind, they make it sometimes bigger and worse than it actually is. I can tell you the average credit score in America is somewhere in the 600 range. And people think that if they're in the 5s or the 6s, all is lost. That's not true at all. Not only can I help people look to repair their credit, give them tips. In my case, and in most banking relationship cases, the bankers can give you advice and they don't charge you. So when you go to like a consultant or a credit repair, they want you to pay them for that advice. You can go to your bank and get that advice for free. So that's one of the things I like to try to help people. Now, I'm not saying that consulting professionals is a bad thing. In some cases, you need that professional advice. Maybe you need a business consultant and you need to pay for that service because it's of value to what you're doing. I'm in no way saying that that's unnecessary, but I think in the average American's case, they can go to Credit Karma, they can pull their report, they can bring their report to a professional like me, and we can help them dig into it and understand, what does this mean? How can it be fixed? What can I do to get my score higher? So that's some of the things that I start with a business owner. When I'm meeting with them, I ask them, do you know what your credit score is? And if they say, well, I'm not sure, I think it's bad. And I say, well, why do you think it's bad? What do you think the score is? What's a bad score to you? Because everyone's perception of that is vastly different versus what an underwriter wants to see. So I try to give them some guidance. What I usually do for someone who does have some credit bumps, we usually come up with a plan for repair. That repair can take up to 2 years. The one thing I like to tell people is this isn't a quick fix. This is something that takes time and effort. It's like building a home. You wouldn't want a home that was built in 2 weeks because it seems like it would be a little shabby. It's the same thing with your credit. You want to build a strong credit score, something that's going to carry you in life, and it doesn't get fixed overnight. Most times, any changes you make to your credit report in the repair stage takes up to 90 days just to see those results. Wow. In the score, in the reporting, because there's a lot of things out of your control. How the credit cards report, or utilities, or the people that you're paying. Not every company reports every month. So if you've done some good things or paid down some debt, it might take 2 months to catch up on your report. So it's not an instant gratification kind of thing. It's definitely something that you should plan for, and then stick to the plan. I had someone who I helped a few years back. He had like a 480 credit score. 2 years later, he had a 700 credit score, and he was able to buy a home.
That's wonderful.
And it was just some minor things that were keeping his score very low. Not enough accounts on his report to show history that he was paying his bills. And so it was just, when he actually got the report for me, we were able to come up with a plan for him that worked.
That's amazing. And it's so incredible what you do, because you are so sensitive to the fact that people do have the fear. I think in terms of the group, it was a little tough. I'm safe to assume that it was a little tough from what I've heard. People who did join us, that they were hesitant to sign up because it's very tough. And sometimes, even for myself, at times embarrassing to talk about your finances, and you almost feel like you did something wrong. So not only is there the fear, there's the shame.
Yeah. And
it's hard to confront these issues. And then, might be a little disappointing to hear, when the grand scheme of it, 2 years is not that much time to rectify something, but it might sound a little disappointing. So how do you help people, or even yourself, when you start to lose a little bit of that hope that we won't be able to kind of dig ourselves out of this financial debacle?
Well, so one of the things that I do is, because the time, people always think 2 years, 4 years, whatever the case may be, to try to resolve something, that seems like a long time from now. So I always say to them, well, how old will you be in 4 years? And they say, let's give an example, 46. So how old will you be in 4 years if we don't handle this issue? Well, 46. So in 4 years, you're still going to be 46 whether you handle this issue or not. What's the difference? You're either going to turn 46 and your issues will be behind you, or you're going to turn 46 and all these same issues you have today are still going to be waiting for you to fix them. It's not going to fix themselves.
I love that. And it reminds me of when we were in the group. I remember you and Megan both talking about taking action.
Yeah.
And there are resources, and, confront it so it doesn't linger and things like that.
Because it's going to be there whether you handle it or not. So if you're someone who knows that, oh, I had some things from when I was 20 and stupid and I got a credit card and I spent money. Well, guess what? You and probably 98% of America. I can tell you most kids today in college don't understand credit. They don't teach any courses around it. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things I volunteer to do is teach financial education in junior high, high school, even in elementary school to some degree, because kids don't understand. And then they have this bank that gives them a credit card, and they don't understand you have to have the money for those items before you put them on your credit card, because that bill's coming in whether you have the money or not. So I think to take the shame out of it, we're all human. Like I said, I handle people who have hundreds of dollars, and I handle people who have millions of dollars, and they all have issues. So if that puts it in perspective for your average person, it doesn't matter whether you're making $5 million a year or $100,000 a year or even $50,000 a year. Everyone has credit issues. So
well, that's a relief.
Yeah. So you don't have to feel ashamed, because just like you have issues, so do people who even make more money. So it isn't about the amount of money you make. And I think that's where the shame comes in. People feel well, at this age, I should be making this or doing that. Whatever your life, whatever you're doing in your life at that moment is just your steps at that time. And to me, any step in the right direction is still going to get you to your end game, even if it's baby steps. If you have to go 50 steps left and you take 3 steps today, 5 steps tomorrow, you're going to get there. If you take no steps, you're just going to be exactly right where you are, and it'll be years later and you'll be older and nothing will be repaired. So that's the way I try to liken it for people who are just like, oh, that seems like a long time. Yes, it does, but Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly. Yep. And I so appreciate your positivity with this, because I think this is what we all need when it does come to tackling our finances. And, I think some other things too that I recognize at the group and talking to some other people is that our worth comes into play. Yeah. So I love hearing you say that you go and you volunteer to talk to younger kids and different people. You came to talk to us, because I think that's another element that might hold people back from actually finding the solutions, or be taking action to then achieve their goals, because they feel that, what's their worth if they're not pulling in the money, or if they have this credit score that's awful, how can they talk about what they know? And I think we have to really, and I'm trying to, for myself and for others, recognize that our worth is not what our bank account is. It's not our finances, and it doesn't take away all the things and knowledge and love and expertise that we can share with people.
That's 100% true. And anyone who's ever, had a job or been in the workforce, when you think about it, you can work for one company and make X dollars a year, but then you'll have another company offer you way more for that same exact role. So you have to value yourself and, work with and for people that value you. So I say that, and I'm speaking to the value because I come in contact with business owners who, when they do a business plan and they're getting started, they forget to pay themselves. They say, well, I'm not going to take a salary for the first year, 2 years, 3 years. And if you are financially in a position to forego a salary, that's great. Some business owners have a nest egg that they can live off of while they get their business off the ground, and that's part of their plan, and that's okay. But if you're somebody who works for a living and then you're trying to launch your own business, your time is valuable. pay yourself. That's an expense line on your business plan. You are worth that salary. And I think that's where a lot of people, the pride and self-worth comes into play. They feel like, well, maybe they don't deserve to get paid. That's not true. I don't care if it's a small amount. You should always include that in your business plan, that you need to get paid for your time that you're putting into this business.
I love that you are sharing that, because we talked about that at the group as well. And I can remember a few years back when I had my business, I was not paying myself for the longest time. And it started to feel like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And I remember paying myself like $100 finally. And I was like, this is amazing, So
Right?
there really is the mindset is there when you are able to reward yourself for your hard work and your value. So I think that's great. Now, we talked about some financial resources.
Sure.
So I say, let's go into them for everybody, because you had some really great resources, tips, advice.
So one of the resources for business owners looking for some assistance with business plans and where to file business docs is Temple Business School. The services are free. The students who are in school to learn about business are the ones that assist you with the direction of their directors and professors. So it's all very professional. And it's definitely, there's even a law school as well. So you can even consult legal students and get legal advice and not really have to put out, a whole lot of money. And especially when you're launching a business, you don't have a lot of money to to put out for professional advice, because you're trying to get the business started and you want to use that money for other things. So that's one of the resources I direct people. The WBEC is the Women's Business Opportunity Resource Center. They not only have various ways to help you get financing, they have a lot of workshops. They point you in the right direction for business plans and, business documentation. They're a really great resource right in Center City. If you Google them, it would be WBEC Philadelphia, because they're like a national organization. So you want the local people to be able to help you. Also, SCORE is another one. They are excellent at helping people put together a business plan that you could then present to like an SBA to get an SBA financing startup loan. So they know exactly what goes into those pieces of business to help you get approved by a lender, because when you're doing SBA especially, your business plan is more important than anything. That is essentially your guide to having the financier understand why you need the money, how much money you need. That's where you tell your story, why your product, service, gift is so important to the outside world. What research it shows, your effort to put forth that business.
Okay, that was my next question to you, is what's important to include from the opposite perspective, but that answers that question.
Yeah, so the business plan, the SCORE people will help you put into the business plan exactly what those underwriters want to see and need to see to make an informed decision on whether to lend.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I'll make sure to list those in our description so people can click right on the link, because those resources are so great. And I know a lot of us
and they're all free. You don't have to pay for any of those services.
It's even better. Yeah, we love free.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's important. There's things out there for people. Okay. And even though it's the Women's Business Opportunity Resource Center, men are allowed to also go there. So it isn't, even though it was named for women, they do not discriminate. Okay, I always make sure I put that in there, because people see the word women's, but it's run by women and there's a lot of women partners, but men are actually allowed to attend and be a part of all the services and resources. So.
That's great. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I assumed the same thing. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, so now you also mentioned about taking those baby steps, so what would you say would be the first step for somebody who is looking to figure out this financial piece in their life?
So my best advice is start with your long-term and short-term goals. So if your long-term goal is, I want to buy a house, and you have credit issues, then your short-term goal would probably be clean up my credit, get my credit score high enough so then I can apply for a mortgage, or maybe save for a down payment and clean up my credit. So it could be multiple things. So I would say really uncover what it is that you want to accomplish. Like, where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And then we can figure out the years in between, because if you know the destination, then we can figure out the path. And I think that is the key to any plan, financial or otherwise, is knowing where do you want to be? Where are we trying to get you to? And then we can figure out the steps.
All right, so let's go into a little bit more of the opposite side of things, maybe a little bit more spiritual approach.
Yeah.
Based on your experience or your beliefs or your advice or all of that.
I can definitely speak to that.
Okay, go right for it. Share it with us all.
So, positive energy has a profound impact in life and in business. I myself have always practiced, positive thinking, positive reinforcement, positive energy, because we are what we attract. If you go out in the world feeling down and depressed and miserable, you're going to attract lower energies. But when you go out with hopefulness and, a light heart and happiness, I believe that you attract those opportunities as well. So you are what you reflect into the world. I personally had the opportunity to go to some workshops when I was much younger. I was working for a small bank at the time. It was my first step into management, where my career started to take off. And they sent me to this workshop of positive speakers. And at this workshop, they gave you different tips to always think on the bright side and create positive energy in your life. And that definitely resonated with me, because I'm generally a happy person. I like to spread joy. It's just something, I don't know, I guess it's just a personality thing for me, but my mother was always very happy, so I like to think I took after her. So I went to this workshop, and in the workshop they said, write down 3 things you absolutely want right now, in your life. 3 things that would make your life better, make things easier. So at the time I was newly married to my husband. We had just had a baby. And then I had my 2 other kids from my previous relationship, who my current husband was raising. And of course, when you have kids, you always think, I need to make more money. I'm going to have college and tuition and, life things. So one of the things I wrote on my little list at that time was, I want to make $52,000 a year, because in my mind, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, that seemed like a good amount of money to be able to raise a family for myself. The other thing was, I wanted to travel out of the country. I wanted to go to a tropical place, because I had never really seen any place but the Jersey Shore at that point in my life. And the third thing, I don't even remember what it was. It might have been like, get to my goal weight, 3 things that were important to me at the time. Be healthy, whatever. So you write them on this piece of paper and you fold them up, and you were supposed to put them away and just kind of meditate on them periodically. Within 6 months of writing that list, which that was the first time I had ever wrote things that I specifically wanted, I got a job offer making $65,000 a year. I almost fell out of my chair. At that time, I might have been making 40 grand. And I thought, wow, like, it was more than what I wrote. And how did that happen? And I didn't even do anything to make it happen. At least I didn't feel like I did anything. I had worked with someone previously who went to another company. The company I was working for was just bought by a new company. Our jobs were going to be changing. So it was a transitional time for me in my life. I wasn't sure how my career at this particular place was going to end up. And the person who left thought that I was a very good leader and told the new company about me, and they made me a job offer. I didn't even apply. So that's why I think it was so shocking to me at that time. So I did send them a resume and have some meetings, and I did accept the offer and went with that company. And that started my ever great career in banking. But I was so very excited that had come true. And I also ended up traveling to Mexico for the very first time and got to see that tropical place and leave the United States. So 2 of those things came true in a very short period of time. I was very excited, and I went back to that list and thought, oh my God, this really worked. From that point on, I started to keep lists like that for myself, because I feel like I kind of willed it to happen. And I started to notice, I read the book, The Secret. I started to read about that spiritual, mental energy that we all have that we probably don't tap into enough. And I thank those leaders for sending me to that event, because I don't know that I would have tapped into it as soon as I did in my life. I probably eventually would have, but at that point, not only was I a believer, but I was practicing these meditative things without even realizing how powerful my positive energy was. I was drawing these things into my life, and I have to tell you, I started to look back at the past and realize I had been doing it my whole life and just never realized it. Every job I ever got was from a previous job, customers. People would just call me and offer me jobs. I have never truly applied for a job in over 20 years, but I've gotten lots of positions and made very good money. And I wasn't even what you would call looking. I'm not filling out job and going on sites, and like people just knew me, knew my reputation, knew what I was capable of, and would think of me when a position would open and call me instantly. So that was me practicing that secret without even realizing it.
Wow. Through
my whole life. So, and then at that point when I realized it, I obviously wanted to continue doing it because it was a good thing, and it brought positive things my way, financially, emotionally. It brought people to me, people that I needed in my life, supportive people, good friends. Just, what I was reflecting into the world was definitely coming back into my space. And I think people more often than not look at the bad things. And by no means am I saying I've had this wonderful, blessed life, because I've had bad things happen. My husband fell 2 stories and was disabled. He was in a wheelchair for 2 years and couldn't walk. That happened right after I got that job, making all that money. And I thought this was God's way of protecting me, because had I not been making the finances I was making, that injury would have been financially catastrophic to us. He was making the bulk of the income at that point. He was supporting our family. So, obviously I wasn't, living rich off this new job, but I was still living. My bills were paid. My kids were fed. I was able to, make the ends meet without my husband's income. While he did eventually get like workman's comp, it was a work accident. He did get compensated. It took months. You still have to feed your kids. You still have to pay your bills. Things happen in life. But I think my positive energy protected me from something that could have been otherwise very catastrophic to any other household when you think about it.
That was my question to you is since we're talking about like anxieties and worries that people face, I'm sure you might have had those moments, but do you feel like you've always reverted back to that optimism and that positive energy that things will work out? And
yes, absolutely. I'm not saying I've never had worries, of course. When he got hurt, I thought, oh, how are we going to do this? And then everything kind of just fell into place. So I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer that things will work out. I'm also very action oriented. I don't wait for the bills to pile up before I say, oh, I'm going to need a solution. I try to think ahead. I try to keep that positive attitude, like, okay, if I do this and this, no matter which way this goes, I'll be good. If it goes this way, I'll be good. So I try to look at the different scenarios, in my own life. And I definitely would recommend that for people to not always look at the positive side, but always look at the worst case scenario. So if this happens, what's plan B? Having a plan B doesn't mean you're a negative thinker. Having a plan B means failure's not an option.
That just gave me chills. I love that. And I'm glad that you say that, because it shows that there is a way to get back on your feet.
Yes.
And there is a way to combat that anxiety and make the plan Bs, because people who have anxiety and worries, a lot of the time they procrastinate, and it ties all into what we talked about at the group about taking action.
Yes.
So it's such a great hearing your story. I love when I could hear that story over and over again. I didn't know about your husband at the time, so I'm glad that worked itself out. But I just love hearing your story, because it is such a great example that things will work out and you can take action and good things will come.
I think part of it is believing in yourself and knowing there's always another option, even if in your mind it didn't work out the way you thought it would. Like, I'll be honest, my main goal when I was a young woman was I was going to marry a man who made good money, and I was going to stay home and be some trophy wife. That has not
I
happened.
can't see you doing
Yeah.
that.
That was not to be. I did not marry a man who made, millions of dollars and get to sit home and just be some trophy wife. That just wasn't in the cards for me. And I laugh when I say it. My husband, I joke all the time that I'm still his trophy wife, even if I'm not sitting home. He ended up being the one retired very early, so we call him the trophy husband now. But just goes to show you, sometimes we have visions of what our life is supposed to be. My best advice to people is be flexible. Sometimes your vision and your plan is not God's plan and God's vision, or whatever your religion is. The universe, for us, for those non-religious people. For me, I just feel like my life is the way it was meant to be. It followed the path it was meant to follow, and I think my flexibility and positive attitude definitely helped me along that journey, because obviously it doesn't reflect today what I thought it would be when I was 17, 18, 22, and so on. So I think people just need to be a little flexible in that vision.
That's great advice. Very, very, very great advice. All right, so we're going to go into some feedback from the attendees of the group, and I'll just talk to you a little bit about it. And if you could just give us, your thoughts on it, because this is, as you know, the podcast is the chance for those who attended to get a little bit more insight.
Sure.
As well as share breakthroughs. We like to hear the positive too, but also for those who weren't able to attend, to just get a little bit more into, some thoughts based on your expertise, your, advice, anything like that. So one of the things somebody wrote is that their favorite takeaway was learning resources on how to begin in certain places with money. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this from the industry standpoint? Even more so than what you've already mentioned previously?
Yeah. We'll go down the path of, if you're starting a business, in most cases, when you're starting a business and you're asking to borrow money to help finance that business, the industry looks for 10 to 20% of your own funds, and they will lend you the other 80. I think when people look at startups, they don't know how much to kind of have saved or set aside. And when I say 20% and 80%, I'm talking a total project cost. So if you say to me, Cara, I want to start a hair salon and I estimate the total project to be $100,000, then in dollars and cents, we would expect that you have $20,000 and the bank you'd be applying for 80. I think it's important for people to know those parameters so that when they're making budgets and looking at things to maybe get a business started, it's important to know how much should I have saved. Now, to understand that the $100,000 would be your total project, you have to look at research, competition, the industry norms. Those are things that I think people don't take into consideration. They just kind of have a price in their mind. It's always good to maybe talk to, if you're having a shop, but we'll just use the hair salon scenario. You're having a salon built, or you're going to rent a building and have fit out. You might want to get 3 estimates from 3 different contractors based on material that you believe you'll need. So it's always good to have multiple estimates, research what it could potentially cost. The other thing is look at if something goes wrong. Let's say you rent this space and all of a sudden the electrical needs redoing and they didn't disclose that in your rental agreement. That's a cost you're going to have to incur. So you want to, plan for the uncontrollable stuff. When they open the wall, they're not going to know if the pipes are bad prior to opening it. They're not going to know if the electrical is good or bad. So those are things that you may not think about, but are important when you're trying to get a business off the ground. And you can kind of liken that to any business. I used a hair salon as an example, but a retail shop, if you're going to manufacture something, you're going to need equipment. There's a lot of things that play into depending on what line of business you're going into. If you want to do home health care, you have to take into consideration for you to have a patient list, you might need help. You might need employees. That's going to be an expense. You can't do everything yourself. You might need an office staff, somebody who does billing, because you're not going to have time to do every single thing and take care of all the patients. So you have to be realistic in your planning and your numbers.
I'm glad you mentioned about that you can't do everything yourself, because I think in ways, at least for myself, to cut corners. I have done that in the past where I'm like, well, I'll just do it myself. And then you burn out very quickly. And that's not good for anybody.
Exactly.
And I can relate to your example. And I actually pat myself on the back a little bit for this, because when I started my business at 24 and had no idea what I was doing, I just knew that, I opened a Pilates studio and I thought, well, I can teach people. And, I did production work, so I was able to manage things. And I figured, and I'm very like, I can do anything, and I did it. But one of the things, and hearing you say this is good confirmation, when I did get a loan, and I made sure I had months of rent and expenses covered within that loan after the startup fees, because in worst case scenario, as you mentioned earlier, the plan B, if nobody was coming to me, I still had to pay for that.
Yeah.
So luckily and fortunately, I should say that I was able, I built clients very quickly, and that was just then extra money that was a good cushion for those like winter months, or those months that people were vacationing and nobody was working out, things like that.
Seasonality. That's another thing I think people don't consider when going into business. Is there a seasonality to the industry that you're trying to be in? Like you're mentioning, okay, in the summer, people go away. They're not going to their local dance class, gym. They might take a 2-month hiatus. What does that look like for your bottom line? What is your real sales cycle?
Exactly.
And when you're starting a business, you don't think along those lines necessarily.
So this is good. I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And you mentioned something, which is my next question to you. You mentioned bottom line. So are there a few financial terms that you could share with our listeners, and explanations that would help them to feel more comfortable confronting and taking action?
Yeah. So if you hear, so the first term I'll use is cash flow. A lot of business owners will hear this term. You'll hear your banker use it. Cash flow is the money that flows in and out of the business that allows you to operate. When we say, as long as you have the cash flow to support the loan, meaning you can open your doors, pay all your employees, make a loan payment, pay your electric, buy your supplies, that is the definition of cash flow. Debt service. Debt service is a term that you may be more familiar with on the personal side than the business side. On the personal side, they say debt to income ratio. On the business side, they call it debt service. It's exactly the same thing, that you have enough after your expenses to make loan payments. And it's usually a ratio of 1.25% on the business side. They want to know that you can cover the debt 1.25 times, so 1.25 times after your expenses come out. So they deduct 40% for personal expenses of your income. So if you say you make $100,000 a year, they're pulling $40,000 out of that, and they're only going to use $60,000 as your debt service, because $40,000 they're saying is your expense money that you're using for expenses to live off of. I think it's important to know those terminologies, because when you go to a bank and you start asking about a loan, people might say these terms to you and you might be like, what does that mean exactly? So I always try to, bring it back to the retail side. Most people understand like mortgages, home equity loans. Business loans operate pretty much the same way, with the exception of it's considered a commercial mortgage if you're buying a commercial property. If it's equipment finance, it's called a term loan, which is kind of like a personal loan on the retail banking side. Lines of credit are very much like credit cards. Lines of credit are interest only. When they give you your bill for your monthly payment, it's going to be just like, let's say you have a Macy's card and it has a $5,000 limit, and you go to Macy's and you buy $5,000 worth of stuff, and then you get a bill in the mail and it says pay $25. If you pay $25, how long do you think it's going to take you to pay back that $5,000? A very, very, very long time. And that $5,000 has now become $20,000 in interest because you didn't pay down the principal. It's very important when you have a business line of credit that you make principal payments. You're always going to have that minimum due, but you need to pay extra to pay it down. Lines of credit are great for expenses that you can pay off in 12 months or less. If you have a business expense that is going to take you more than 12 months to pay off, do not put it on a line of credit. That would go on to a term loan. They're just some of the ones that come to mind. Is there anything in particular you want me to mention as far as terminology, or?
No, that was incredible. You are a beacon of knowledge. And I think that will be great for our listeners, because transferring, if they are getting a business from the personal to the commercial, that's important to go in knowing and feeling more comfortable that you know the terminology, things like that. Okay, so we talked about business and those going into business, but now what about the individual who is just looking to get ahead in their finances?
Yeah, so my best advice, and this is something I've done, for myself, so I'm absolutely speaking from experience. You need to sit down with your month's worth of expenses and your month's worth of income, and you need to figure out what those numbers exactly are. What do you have coming in? What do you have going out? Once you know that basic information, you'll be able to come up with a savings plan, ways to fix your credit. If you're trying to save for a down payment, you don't know how much you have extra every month. The other thing I'm going to say is you have to be realistic. When you figure out what's coming in and what's going out, you need to factor in things like fun. You need to factor in things like food. You need to factor in things like Christmas and birthdays, because those are life events that you're not going to forego. So do not discredit them on your budget planning. It would be silly to do so. Most people try to say, well, I'm not going to worry about Christmas. I'll worry about that in December. No, then in December, you're going to be a very stressed out person. I used to budget my kids' vacation money, Christmas money through the entire year. Even if it was just $25 a month, and when vacation rolled around, I only had $1,000 to spend, we went on a $1,000 vacation, and we made it work. Knowing your limits and knowing your budget is important for planning your life, because you're never not going to take a vacation. You're never not going to buy Christmas presents. You're never not going to buy your mother a birthday gift. These are expenses that you need to factor in like a bill. When I was very, very new in my career and we didn't have a lot of extra money, one year we took a week of vacation. I had $300 to spend for fun for my kids. So it was more like a staycation, but we did day events because that's what was in the budget. My kids had a great time. I had a great time. I didn't stress out. I think that that's important to allow yourself because, again, life has to be fun too. It can't be all budgets and work and, never enjoying anything. So that's why I say, even if it's $20 a month, even if it's $25 a month, over 12 months, that will add up to a nice little, maybe it's a dinner, maybe it's, maybe you gave somebody a gift card, whatever it ends up being, it's something. And you'll feel good about being able to do it.
That's so important to mention, because I think that's also where a lot of frustration might come from.
Yeah.
Is that, we're working. And what are we, I hear people say all the time, well, I'm working to just pay bills. So I really am glad that you mentioned that for the listeners, because that really should take precedence.
Yeah.
And budgeting, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So.
And so the other part is, if you're someone, because I know I was this person at one point in my life where the money coming in didn't match the money going out, and it was less coming in than I needed for it to go out. I didn't wait for myself to get in debt. When I saw that the bills outweighed the income, and it may not have been a long period in my life, but there were periods where I wasn't sure how I was going to make things work, I wasn't afraid to call companies and, change things. My electric bill, I did like a budget plan where you paid so much, so you didn't have to come out of pocket the higher months of the year for these exuberant bills. There are programs out there that will help people. If you're a low income person, don't be afraid to go to the utilities and be put on the low income pricing. It's okay. Sometimes people need help. That's why those programs are there. The other thing is for like your cable. That's one of my biggest complaints. I hate paying a big cable bill. I'm like, why am I paying? No one even watches TV, and I was paying like $280 a month for Verizon triple play nonsense. And no, anybody who works for Verizon, I'm not trying to offend you, but that's a lot of money. If you add that up through a year, it's $3,600 for TV that no one's watching because I'm at work for 8 or 10 hours a day. So my solution for that is we now only have Wi-Fi and we stream through Hulu, which is about $44 a month. So for those of you who like to watch a little TV, but you're really not home that much, there are ways to have TV and not pay those $200 and $300 bills.
Right, that's what made more sense for you and your family.
Yeah, and my kids are teenagers and they play a lot of video games, so we needed the internet, but not necessarily 100 channels that cost $300 a month that no one's watching.
Right.
where Hulu had those options. You could still get HBO or Cinemax, and you can add it on, and you weren't locked into a contract. But that's what made sense for me. That was one of the ways I trimmed some money, and not for any other reason than I just thought I was wasting money. And that's another thing. I think people shouldn't be afraid to check in with their bill situation and look for ways to be more efficient. Whether it's utility bills, like let's say maybe you have an older house and you need to be more cost effective with your heat or gas bills. There are ways that you can do that with like new windows and doors, and maybe that's a project you put on your to-do list to lower your utilities in the future because you have an older house or an older situation, and it's ways to cut your bills.
Right, and it goes back to you budgeting in the things that make you happy.
Yes.
So for instance, I love cable. Probably one of the only ones left. So that's my luxury. That's my little bit luxury. But then there are other things, right? But then there's other things where I have looked at, and I'm like, okay, I've looked at more efficiently. Okay, we can do it this way so that it's less costly, so I can have my cable. Right. So I love that. So again, it's making sure that you're confronting it. Yeah. It's not going to go away. Things won't change unless you take action. Yeah. So just a few more things. Sure. I wanted to share this one in particular because it's a very nice. It was very nice feedback from one of the attendees. So she says, I appreciated Cara sharing what she shared, and I'm glad I shared my story with the group as well. I've taken action on some things in my financial situation, and I'm also meeting with Cara soon. Yes. That is wonderful.
Yes, I've actually met with a few of the attendees.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, they reached out to me, and I was happy to help and give them some further, more personal advice.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Cara, so much. That's
it's my way of giving back. We have to stick together. We have to help each other.
We do, and that's exactly what Still Standing is all about. So it makes me so happy to hear that more than just this one attendee was coming to you and has come to you. So thank you.
So I'd say 3 so far.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So now, her favorite takeaway was that there are always resources out there to improve a situation, and you're not alone in the anxiety.
No, certainly not.
So I just wanted to share that with you because I thank you. I'm so grateful.
I'm glad. I'm happy to help.
All right. So I just love everything that you shared, and I'm so happy to have you a part of Still Standing. So, what's next for you? How can people reach out to you? Anything like that?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me is my cell phone, which is 267-334-8160. Or by email. It's cara.rossi@citizensbank.com. I think I also shared some cards at the last event, but they can also always get in touch with you, and I know you know how to get in touch with me as well. And I'm open to have a conversation, whether it's business or personal finances. I have tons of experience in these industries and fields. I might as well use that knowledge for something other than just being in my memory. So I'm happy to help whoever wants to reach out.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So now we always finish out the podcast with an affirmation or a practice or a mantra to keep our listeners still standing strong. So is there anything, for example, how we finished our group with I am unstoppable or I am still standing, or, is there something that you would like to share with the listeners?
Oh, it's definitely I'm still standing, because this year has been a tough year. Even for somebody as positive as me, I lost my mother in May. So at a time when I thought I probably wouldn't be still standing, I am. So I'm proud of that.